guys, welcome back. We were just chatting, and before we usually like make sure that everything that is like PG-13 is what kind of goes in the podcast. But then we were chatting, and I just found out that Nate just had COVID and is like kind of like going out of it. So I think out of all four of us in here, we're like, you're the only one, man. So tell us about that. I don't know if we'll call it unfortunate experience,
Mm-hmm.
and how's that been for you, man?
Wait, would you call it
Yeah.
a fortunate experience?
Unfortunate. I think it's
Unfortunate. Yeah.
unfortunate.
No, yeah. So just to get a backstory, I mean, so I traced it back on where I got it from, and I ended up getting it from my parents because I saw them on Father's Day weekend. My dad got it from his job because two of the girls that work with him, that work for him, they tested positive and didn't say anything to anybody because they were scared that they were going to lose their job. So if you're one of those people, don't be an a-hole, get tested. And if you do find out you're positive, please speak up. So that's how I found out that I got it. Fortunately, I didn't pass it on to anybody. So my wife tested negative. My in-laws tested negative. The family that
You
I
didn't
was
pass
with
it to your
that
wife?
weekend. No, which was
Really?
crazy.
Were
Yeah,
you
which was
just like
How does
crazy.
locked
that
up in
work?
that room right now, and then she was not even like, no kissing, no touching, no
Well,
nothing?
when I found out that I was exposed,
Check his
so when
whoop.
I was gonna say check his whoop score.
Yeah, so when I found out that I was exposed, we slept in separate rooms until I had a negative result. So yeah, so fortunately she did not receive a viral load that prompted her to test positive. So I would say I thought I was asymptomatic for the longest time because I was like, I feel great. Like I was still, doing my thing, nothing changed. I found out I was positive on my 30th birthday, and it's like right at that moment, like the symptoms just started coming. So I did have, there was mainly a lot of fatigue. So it was a lot of fatigue. I'm talking like I could barely talk to Tony and say a sentence without like running out of breath. I had some respiratory impairments. So there was one night where I felt like I was sucking through like a straw, like I was breathing through a straw.
Continue.
And so yeah, so I had some respiratory distress one night that was I think that was probably the closest I thought I was going to have to go to the hospital. But it was only that one night. So after that, my symptoms started to kind of die down a little bit. And and so yeah, I'm at a point right now. I actually got my results because I got retested a couple of weeks ago, and I can officially say that I am COVID negative, which is a
Nice.
huge
And
relief.
I'm guessing you now may have like the antibodies, right? Like,
So I don't have the antibodies. I
really?
got tested for antibodies. So that means one of two things. Either my body didn't produce them, or I got tested for antibodies too early. So I could
Okay.
potentially have antibodies right now. And I just tested for it a little bit too early. They're saying that you want to get antibody tested 90 days after you've been exposed. And I did it maybe 30 days after I was exposed. So yeah, man, I mean, I will say like my biggest takeaway is I'm very grateful for the health state that I'm in, because I think like my dad has it, or my dad had it, my mom had it. My dad's health can definitely improve. And he received a lot worse symptoms. I mean, like really, really bad. We got scared a couple of times that he would have to go to the hospital. But I was able to kind of get through it. I had that like 1 week of symptoms, and I was able to kind of clear the virus and everything. So very fortunate for just my health overall, and just my ability to now be able to go back to working out. So yeah, so to answer what our original question was, that I haven't been working out. I refrained from all physical activity for a month, just to allow my body to fully recover and recuperate. And I actually just did my first workout maybe 2 days ago, which felt great. So yeah, man, that was my story with COVID. Honestly,
How were your hunger? Like, I don't think we like from the nutritional standpoint, like, were your hunger levels affected, or like, did you like experience any kind of like changes as far as that?
Yeah, so my hunger definitely was affected. My appetite was at an all-time low, and we all know that when we're sick, our needs actually go up. So it's like it was kind of like I knew what I needed to do, but my body wasn't giving. It wasn't just stimulated in the way that it needed to be. So yeah, so my hunger was down exponentially. I was pretty much drinking a lot of fluids, hydrate or dihydrate, but yeah, so that was pretty much the big, I think, from a nutritional standpoint. the different changes. But honestly, dude, I didn't change anything with my nutrition. I still like, I still did my thing. I didn't, do any drastic, like, I didn't start drinking lemon water. That's for damn sure. I didn't start like doing all these crazy things that
didn't?
people are saying that people are saying to do. I just made sure that I was eating a lot more veggies, snacking on a lot more fruits and veggies just to get those added nutrients. And I mean, I can stand here today with, and say that COVID is definitely a very serious thing for someone that is pretty healthy. The fact that I thought I was gonna have to go to the hospital because of the respiratory distress, like this shit is real. So if you think this is all a hoax and there's no such thing as a virus, like you're playing yourself. So yeah.
100%.
Nice.
Yeah.
I actually, somebody just shared some of like the not nutritional, like there's actually a doctor that wrote like some like just kind of like some case studies on some of like the patients that he treated with COVID, and some of like the alternative therapies that he actually used. And I think it was like shared by one of actually they talked a lot about vitamin D and the prevention of COVID-19 infection, but also like the role that inflammation can have and the mitigation of actual like COVID, and then you talk about like the health status, and I think that actually kind of relates a lot to it. So if you do have like a pretty bad diet, then most likely you are in a pro-inflammatory state. And I think like, I don't know, this is just me kind of like, thinking out loud, but I honestly believe that your health is like direct correlation to not only what you're eating, just kind of like the state that you're in, and your symptoms, I would believe that, or that would assume that are heavily related to like that health state that you're kind of like eating in a specific time frame. So if you're eating a ton of like, pro-inflammatory like foods, and like, not necessarily getting enough omega-3s and all these different things that are kind of like happening, most likely your symptoms are probably not going to be the best. I think it's obviously very personal. Like I have a friend that she's a CrossFit gym owner. They like train super hard, like she eats well, and they got hit really badly for an entire week. Like she was like down. So I guess like it really depends, but I was just kind of like looking at some things in that regard.
Yeah, a lot of the research, like you were saying, that I had seen with COVID was the inflammation, and so that's why I always say like I didn't really change anything up. I think my diet as a whole is addresses that. So I just kind of maintained with taking fish oil. Obviously, I was consuming fish at least 2 to 3 times per week. Obviously, loading on the fruits and veggies, things like that. And I think the biggest thing is just the rest. It was hard because we all work from home, so it's like we're all kind of programmed to just like keep going. So like Tony and we had like our morning meeting, and like I would work probably maybe a couple hours, but then it was like I turned everything off, and I just really laid down the whole rest of the day. So I think that was another big thing that helped, was that rest. Because I know me, like when I get sick normally, I like say F it and I just kind of motor through things, but then I'm now sick for 2 weeks instead of a week. And so I knew when I got the COVID that I was like, all right, if I want to expedite my recovery, I really, like, it's not a joke, and I really need to take that rest part seriously. So my days consisted of, being in an isolated room for, close to 12 hours a day, doing absolutely nothing except for watching Netflix.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well,
And I remember you saying that it was like breathing through a cocktail straw. Like
Yeah.
when you're trying to sleep.
Yeah. The one day that I had the worst respiratory distress was I felt like I was breathing through a cocktail straw, like not the big ass McDonald's ones that you can, these were like it was really bad. And like, no matter how I laid, I felt like I just had that pressure on my chest. I could barely breathe. And I ended up staying up for maybe like 4 or 5 hours out of fear that if I went to sleep, something like some respiratory distress were to happen. And so, I didn't have my Whoop on at that time, but I was calculating my respirations per minute, and I could tell throughout the week how it was varying. So like, I think one night I even got up to maybe like 16, 17 respirations per minute, which for me is pretty high. I usually stay around like 12 to 14. So just that increase told me that I was like, okay, well, my vitals are a little bit off. So Luckily, I didn't have a fever, which I think was the best part of it all. I guess that's the silver lining, is I didn't have a fever, so I didn't experience those symptoms. It was just that initial respiratory distress that I had. I think one of the first or second nights that I got COVID. So
Interesting. Yeah, and then I'm gonna link up this article. It's called "The Inflammation Link and the Role of Nutrition and Potential Mitigation of COVID-19," and it was just literally just published in May. So definitely something that you guys can nerd out a little bit on if you guys want to learn a little more about like potential nutritional strategies as far as that. So, but cool,
And
man.
did
Well,
you
look
guys
up
read the
things.
article on like fermented foods actually helping COVID as well? Like kimchi and things like that. That just came out this week about like kimchi and other probiotic foods
Yeah, send it
shown to
over. We'd
help.
love to read about it.
yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I also want to make a note of, since we're talking about like research and kind of like nerding out on things, COVID, like people need to understand that COVID, we only have like 6 months of data on. So always keep up to date with like the CDC, always keep up to date, because for example, like now COVID is like, in order to determine if somebody is fit to go back to work, we're moving from a test-based approach to now a symptom-based approach. So we're starting to realize that like the virus stays in you for up to 90 days. And so, but you're only infectious for like the first, let's say 10 to 20 days, depending on how severe you had COVID for. So this is an always evolving thing, I think, that's going on. And because COVID is so new, we have very limited data. So whoever's watching this or whoever's listening to this, like just be sure you're always, each week, I mean, things are changing each week, because even the experts don't have a full grasp on what exactly is going on.
Yeah.
And that's what I did notice throughout this whole time I was sick, because I was just researching, okay, what are the new guidelines? What are the new things that the CDC is saying? And it was like every week things were changing drastically too. It wasn't just like a one-off thing.
Yeah, they're probably also speeding up the publication process of a lot of this like research, because it's such important people to know, that I'm sure more things are going to be coming out like on a daily basis here on this. So,
Yeah.
so we'll see. Well,
Glad you're
glad
okay,
that
man.
you're,
I didn't
yeah,
even know.
glad that
Thank
you're
you.
feeling
Yeah.
better,
Thank
dude.
you. Yeah. It was all a shock at first. That's why I wasn't really like open about it. And then I figured, this is actually great to talk
Yeah.
about,
And
because
just
not
for
a lot of
people
people.
listening, and if you're curious as far as like how to get tested, I did get tested. I think it was like 2 weeks ago. We were in our gym. There was like 5 people that were exposed to it, and 2 of them were actually positive. So of course, we naturally freaked out a little bit. We got tested, and there's a company, I think out of California, called Pixel by LabCorp, and you don't have to have health insurance. You can literally just go to the website. You can say you have health insurance or don't have health insurance. It's still free, and they send you a kit. So this is probably, I think there's like 2 different kinds of tests, like the ones that are like super invasive, like they literally put, not sure that's the one they use with you, but the one that they put the swab like all the way to your, like the back of your throat, like to your
Language centers.
nostrils.
You want to make
Yeah.
a grown man cry like instantly, shove one of those things up their nose.
Yeah,
That
so
thing
I
was
think that's obviously
horrible.
the invasive one. Somebody has to do it, but then there's ones that are more like around your nose that may not detect as good like COVID, but at least it kind of gives you something to do. And literally, like they sent it to me on a Monday. On a Tuesday, I had it out. On a Tuesday, it was here at my house. I got tested that day. I put everything out in the mail, and then it was delivered to them on Wednesday. On Thursday, I already have my results. So it was pretty fast, in case somebody like gets curious as to like, because I know I struggle a lot trying to find locally places that I can get tested, and sometimes it was either through insurance, or sometimes the hospitals that were not really clear on how to do the proper testing and all that stuff. So it's, definitely, if you're looking into like ways that you can kind of get that done, then something like that would definitely help. So
Yeah, look for the community centers. I mean, we found, because Miami is like one of the epicenters for it, Miami-Dade County, there was maybe 5 community centers. So I think, I'm not necessarily sure if they charge you at community centers. I think and it was all drive-through. So we just stood in our car. I got both the antibodies and the regular lab tested, but I'm not sure in Hillsborough County, where you and Tony are at, if they have community centers yet. I think they're talking about it, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
Interesting.
So,
well, glad you're okay, man.
thank you.
Let's switch the topic now. The question for you, Nate, is have you drank a beer, or have you drank any alcohol ever since you got diagnosed with COVID?
Oh yeah. So it was funny, because my birthday, I got diagnosed, but I was like, I'm not going to let this crap on my parade. Like, it's my 30th birthday. And mind you, like my wife had planned this like massive birthday party for me at my in-laws house. And like, we had to cancel everything when I found out I got
That sucks.
exposed. So that day it was like, not only, did I not have like, my close group of people around me, but I was also tested positive. So I was like, you know what, fuck this, or screw this. I'm sorry. I'm going to have a beer. I had a beer, the worst possible thing I could have done. The worst. I just immediately felt just absolute like crap. I just felt super fatigued. And so I was like, all right, well, I can't drink any beer. But as soon as I got my results back, yeah.
You celebrated.
Oh, hell yeah. Oh, yeah. But it's nice because I only have to drink like one or two. And I'm like, oh, woo, all right, this is woo, this is awesome.
And if you're listening to this and you're wondering why are these guys talking about drinking beer, is because today's topic, which obviously it was planned before I knew, or we knew that Nate had COVID, and we really want to dive deep into like on understanding his experience, is actually related to alcohol and body composition. I was in a workshop, I think it was last weekend in Big Guava CrossFit here where I train, and one of the coaches actually asked a question: what happens with alcohol? Can you drink alcohol and still being able to, like, either reduce body fat, maintain like performance and all these different things? So interestingly enough, I get the research reviews by Alan Aragon, and one of them actually in regards to or related to the effect of body composition response to high intensity interval training, and they call it the Beer HIIT study. So we wanted to I actually sent it to all of you guys like before this this conversation, and I'm sure I'm going to link this up in the show notes. Because it's a typical question that kind of raises up a lot, and we're gonna kind of break down this. I kind of skimmed through like the actual article, but I wanted to kind of ask you guys as a perspective on not just this specific article, but what is a typical recommendation where somebody asks you, like, can alcohol impair my ability to lose body fat? What is like the typical response that you may give them?
I mean, I take a look at post-exercise muscle synthesis. So and I sent this to you guys via text too. There was a study that I read that inhibited up to 37% of muscle synthesis. And I think one of the things that I've seen before in the past is, like, if you do drink alcohol, drink it with protein. And even then it inhibited up to about 24%. So there's a wide variance between 24 and 37. So typically that's usually the notion that I'll throw at people that are asking about it. But as a beer drinker myself, it's like you kind of have to gauge between enjoying your life and also your performance, and it's a delicate balance, 100%.
I would say 100% yes, it does affect it. And just like Desi, every time I get on client calls, they ask about alcohol. And when I worked in pro baseball, there were some clubhouses that had kegs of beer, right, or beer cans. So you gotta talk about it. So what I educate them on is like, look, I also drink. And that's where I start, because people probably always think like dietitians don't drink. They just eat salads, chicken, rice, and they don't drink. And
we get after it.
Yeah. There's proof in the pudding. We can post videos of Andres being a bartender.
I still can't believe that.
It's a whole nother story. But we start with, yes, we drink, but we understand the ramifications that are going to happen. So will it affect body comp? Yes, it can if you're someone who's a habitual drinker. And when we go to dissect this study, we'll kind of distinguish what is drinking for the study and then what does actually look like in real life situations. Because I think that's where the big difference is, like application and practice versus what the study says. But I would say alcohol 100% affects body composition and weight goals, just depending on how you're trying to reach it and what you're trying to do.
Let's break down the study, because I think it's.
What do you think, Andres? Do you think it affects?
I think it does, but I think it also depends on the context, and it also depends on what moderation means for some people. And also like the thing with like a lot of these like studies that they're looking into like the effect of alcohol into specific markers like this is the fact that they're only like usually like 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks. And one of the comments that actually Alan or whoever did the research on this, or like the comments on this, which I guess was like Alan Aragon, he basically said, well, one of the things about this, some of this, the effects of drinking typically for 4 to 10 weeks, like 2 weeks is like, okay, he actually kind of like, and I quote, it says, therefore, a small gain of 1 kilogram over a 10-week period while insignificant within the context of the time frame, would amount to 26 kilograms in 5 years if no energetic composition occurs. So like a lot of the studies look at the effect on some of the stuff that happens in a period of like 2 to 3 months. And sure, like maybe the effect is like it's non-significant, which means that, well, it's like the changes that occur are just not statistically significant, which means it wasn't really that much. So in the context of that, sure, like maybe it's not going to affect you overall, but then in the long term, if you continue on that behavior, probably will. So I think that's the main kind of like takeaway, because some people actually would look at the study and then would say, oh, so I can drink one or two. Like I think that the people in the study were drinking a couple alcoholic beverages per day, specifically like weekly, and it was pretty much both of them were like lost body mass. Like they both like lost weight, and then both actually like reduced body fat, and even some of them actually showed increase in like lean mass. So they look at this as like, okay, so I can justify my alcohol drinking habit, and or like I can justify having a beer after my lunch, and I can do that so daily. And obviously that's what they may take away from this, which is probably far from the truth. That's the way that I kind of look into it.
Yeah, because this study, I think guys had a drink after lunch and a drink after dinner. That's
Yeah.
with lunch
I
and dinner,
would
not
have loved
after.
to participate in that study.
I
Yeah.
know,
right?
Me up, coach. Where do I go?
Well, it's funny. So let's break down the study, because like the way they did it
Yeah.
is like, this is actually, it was done in Spain. And the reason why they did it is because they look at so many like people, and like it happens a lot in like Latin American countries too. Like they do a lot of like, high interval intensity training, which in some cases is actually sports stuff, like playing soccer, playing basketball, like leisure stuff. Like you go to like here in the US, you go to the YMCA and play like, shoot some hoops with some of your friends, or play like, pick up soccer and stuff like this. And usually what happens after you do this, like on a Friday or stuff like this, is like you go in and grab a beer with your friends, or grab a drink or something like celebrity.
Just one?
Well, sometimes it's more than one, which we'll talk about. So what they did is like literally this researchers has said, well, if this is happening often, we want to know what happens in it, because it's never been studied before. Like when you incorporate high intensity interval training, and you incorporate alcohol into that. So they separate this like this people. It was about, I think, like closer to 72 subjects, and they split them up into 4 groups. And they ask him, would you like to drink or would you not like to drink? Like literally. So like they ask him that question, and based on their responses, they split them up into either a group of 8 that was actually just drinking beer alone, another group of 8 which is actually drinking like a seltzer with vodka, so it was more like a heavier alcohol, and the other 2 groups, which is either like a non-alcoholic beverages, I think, or a non-alcoholic beer beverage, or just water alone. And they started to look at the effects that they would have. Now, the type of like training that they would have them do, I actually looked through specifically what the protocol was, and they have them do stuff like burpees and like circuit type of training. So burpees and like rope, battle ropes, and all kinds of stuff like that. So trying to get the RPEs, or rate of perceived exertion, like closer to 8 out of 10. So it was like, they would ask him like throughout the workouts, how hard is this? And they would say like, okay, this is super hard. So an 8 out of 10 is like pretty intense. So, and then essentially they looked at through like to what they would happen for this people for the course of like 10 weeks. And they were having like an alcoholic drink for the groups that were drinking alcohol at lunch and also at dinner. This hidden workouts or protocols were implemented twice per week. So it wasn't really on a daily basis, but it's really significant of like some of like the stuff of how it relates to maybe like a lot of people that do CrossFit, a lot of people that do like, again, some of those like leisure sports and stuff like that, or even like F45s, Orange Theory Fitness, all the stuff. It's usually the same high intensity interval training. And essentially just the shorts of it that results is like there were no really changes in body mass, waist circumferences, visceral adipose tissue, which is also like known as VAT, bone mineral density. In fact, both in all training groups actually saw significant decreases in fat mass together with increases in lean mass. So of course, that's what we were talking earlier. Like you look at the study and you're like, okay, so I can have 2 drinks every single day and then not affect my overall results. So that was kind of like the main thing about it. Of course, there's a lot of limitations that we just need to kind of like go in depth in here. But I think it also comes down to really what is moderation and what is like an alcohol level that is going to derail you from this. So I guess like you guys, like what would maybe your first initial thoughts after reading some of the stuff as far as like the study?
Well, so the first thing I thought of is what the CDC says towards what is seen as moderation. So for males, they're looking at 14 beverages per week and females at 7. And so it was pretty relative to when they looked at the amount that they were drinking. That was my first thought. And as I was looking at it a little bit more, it was interesting to hear Alan talk about the normal person who is working out 1 to 2 times a week. And then also going a bit further to say like, all right, so it's in everyone's best interest to move. It's in everyone's best interest to actually exercise. So that was my first thought at it, like taking a look at moderation. And Andres, you being a bartender, I think the serving for liquor is about 1.5 ounces, right?
Yeah, 1.5
okay,
to 2
so
ounces.
So for someone who's like, oh, I'm doing 2 cocktails a day, most cases you don't have that type of eye, you don't have it measuring, so like you might be pouring yourself stiff drinks where it's actually 4 times. So that was just my thought process kind of looking at it. I was like, oh, okay, specificity is huge in this case.
Yeah, 100%.
Go ahead, Tony. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Do it, bro. Go for it.
Hurry up.
Is this peer pressure about drinking? But anyway, so like what Desi just said, but also 14 drinks a week. I believe the CDC even breaks it down to 2 drinks a day for men and 1 drink per day for women. Yep. Now, we typically look at what Americans do versus what Europeans do and even Latins. Yes, that might be what Latins and Europeans do, where they might have 2 drinks a day. But in the American culture, it's mostly we save it for Friday, Saturday, maybe Sunday brunch, maybe a happy hour thrown in there. And it's definitely not just 1 mimosa when places are serving unlimited mimosas, right? You're going to get the most bang for your buck.
Baby.
Yeah, get as big a bottle you can, right? Or if they have like unlimited bloodies, you're not just like, oh, you know what? I'm only going to have 2 today. You're like, I'm paying this much. I'm going to get squeeze the juice out of it, right? So let's start there.
And I'm going to pass out at 2. Let's go.
Yeah. And then if your gym is doing something afterwards, you're probably going to get at least a 12-pack, and you're going to have at least 3 to 4 if you're a guy, and split it with others around you, right? So this study to me doesn't really apply to the typical American, right? Because then on Friday, they might work out Friday morning, then Friday night they go to happy hour with their coworkers when COVID is not around, or even if where they are, they might do a virtual happy hour. They might have a drink or 2 on that hour, then they might continue drinking afterwards. And as Desi said, I highly doubt they're getting a jigger out to put 1.5 ounces, measuring it out like, ooh, this is a great cocktail. They're just whatever I can pour.
Andres, were you one of those cool bartenders that like did a little over pour, or were you like by the book, like 1.5 and you're done?
No,
I don't know, man.
I didn't have that. Well, when I worked at Applebee's, that was like my time as a bartender. Like I was not flipping bottles then.
Gotcha.
And we had to use sometimes I didn't, but I would get yelled at all the time. So we did have to. Most restaurants do have to do it because they have to control for alcohol costs. So
and also the serving size.
It's different.
Yeah. Also the serving size here versus in the European side or even like Latin America, a double like in Europe is a single here.
Really?
Yeah, like when I was going there, I'd be like, let me get a double. And I got a double. And I was like, this is a single to me. This isn't a double. Like, what is this? Pour it up, buddy. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, is everything okay? Did I say something bad?
Yeah.
So it's also, what is the serving size here versus there?
Well, and then get also back to what you were like, what you were saying, Tony. I think it's also, it's not just like the 14 drinks that the people are just saving for the weekend. It's usually the alcohol doesn't really come alone. Like it comes usually in eating settings, right? And typically when you have 14 drinks, you obviously are not making good decisions because, well, you're either happy or a little bit drunk or too drunk. And sometimes obviously that's a time where you are eating uncontrollably, like you're not really kind of managing eat. Like usually most like binge episodes typically happens under the influence of alcohol as well. Like think about going out and then like what's the typical thing that people do after going out? Like they go like and drink.
Taco Bell, pizza.
Good old drunken munchies.
Yeah. So I think it's like we don't really look at it from that perspective. And it's just like you're saying, like nobody actually drinks like, oh, like a beer a day or something like that, which will be considered moderation. Like some people may do like the occasional like glass of wine. And I don't think and some people like say like, I just need to stop the alcohol. Like I think you need to look at it from like the bigger, like, perspective, like is it actually happening like consistently? You're just having one glass per day, like even Saturday, Sunday, or it's like one glass per day, and then when Saturday, Sunday hits, you typically go for like even like the 4, 5, and 6. So you're kind of adding all that up, and definitely it's that not what really maybe kind of causing the issue in the European communities. They just don't get. I feel like, and no offense to us here in America, but I feel like people in Europe, like they don't drink to get drunk or wasted. They just it's usually like combined with like food. It's like part of the experience,
Yeah.
And that's what I have noticed. So it's not like Saturday and Friday come, like, oh, I'm sure there are like cultures and then there are places in Europe that actually still happens, but that's what I have noticed the most. So when we kind of like start to look at some of like studies like this, it's like, well, we're controlling. The thing with the study too is like they didn't really control for other things. For example, like they didn't really control for diet. Like they didn't really ask like what they were eating or like how they were eating. And usually when somebody starts something like this, and then let's say like they were not really doing any kind of thing active prior to, and they started this like workout program as part of a study, you're more also inclined to make a lot of changes to your nutrition. So most likely also they were like eating better, because at the end of the day, if you're working out, you want to see the results, like, so maybe that's some of the things that kind of maybe influence some of the stuff, and they should have maybe controlled it. So I would have loved to see the study in which like they were given the two like things of beer, but then at the same time they were controlling alcohol, calorie intake, and then compared the differences that would exist between the two. I think that would have given a little bit more perspective and kind of better, kind of like a bigger picture as far as this.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So, Andres, real quick, if I can add to that, kind of bringing this a little bit more full circle, Nate, with, we're talking about COVID beforehand. When everything hit, I had a bunch of clients asking like, hey, should I be drinking? And so that same CDC report had talked about the 7 and the 14, and it also talked about gut permeability, and also talked about local inflammation into systemic inflammation in reference to that whole process. And what I had read was usually if someone is a heavy drinker and they were to kick back and not do it for 14 days, that's the amount of time that gut permeability would be able to regenerate. So, kind of bringing this full circle too, it's something to think about. And Andres, I would absolutely agree with what you had said. I mean, from what I know about American culture, a lot of them are drinking to have fun.
yeah.
And it's a whole lot less cultural. And, I definitely saw that working with the baseball team, seeing the Latin guys in the culture, seeing how they came to a dinner or a happy hour. They didn't drink to get drunk. They drank because it was pairing with the food, and it was very different.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also like in the comments on this specific study, they also talk about like, okay, so let's break it down into like, does alcohol actually increase like fat accumulation, or like actually increasing, like, they even kind of refer here to as this as like the beer belly. Is there any kind of research to support that there's like a site specific effect of specifically beer drinking or alcohol drinking into fat metabolism? Like, and honestly what they say here is like, it literally, they say here, this all remains obscure. Like there's just nothing that says that this is kind of causing this. I think the beer belly, based on this, is just a combination of what we just discussed earlier. Nobody just drinks a beer but just sits down and drinks like a 12-pack of beer without eating anything. And it's usually kind of like in relation to like a lack of like movement and sedentarism and all these different things all together.
And sleep.
And yeah, sleep in all these different areas too. Like, I think we talked about this, and we're now in the whoop game here, but my recovery is not the best if I had alcohol the night before, and we talked about this in our last chit chat. So I think it's a combination of all those different things. Performance is affected, because of hydration kind of issues, and because of that, if you do HIIT training, for example, like maybe your performance is not going to be the best. Adaptation is affected. So again, I wouldn't necessarily jump into like drinking like 2 drinks a day just because the study says that it's not going to affect your fat loss, because it can. You just need to look at it from a different lens, I guess, would be the way I would describe that. So interesting. Anyways, anything else you guys wanted to add here today?
Actually, I think to that point, Andres, in terms of like reading studies and kind of just reading the abstract, I think, you know, if you get your hands on a study, obviously reading the abstract will give you a good idea, but we've all been taught that, you know, we look a little bit deeper into that. So for example, I think a big thing that you mentioned was like diet wasn't accounted for, and that's a huge thing. If we're talking about anything body comp wise or performance or things like that, if we're not accounting for diet, then that's a big part of someone's life, especially these test subjects that we're not accounting for. So just kind of digging deeper and just reading these different areas, and usually studies are pretty good at writing limitations. Like hopefully they're doing that.
That's the hope.
So yeah, that's the hope, is that they're kind of identifying their own limitations. But yeah, just like reading studies, you know, at face value may not be the best tactics. It's just kind of really dive into that, because even though you sent this quickly, you know, like kind of looking at these key areas that we know to look at in studies to see if like, okay, they're saying this as the result, but what is that based on? Like, what is that, you know, what was their study design? What are they controlling for? What are they not controlling for? Because that does make a huge difference in the actual interpretation of the overall results.
Yeah, that's the thing with like your research. I'm reading this book by Diana Rogers called Sacred Cow, which definitely is going to be something we're going to cover in the future about, you know, like meat consumption and like really what's like the all the reasoning behind all the fear and all that kind of stuff that is around it. And she literally devotes an entire like chapter to discuss interpretation of research. And really, what does that mean? Like the typical observational studies, like diet studies, like when they look at when somebody eats, what somebody ate like 3 years ago or like 5 years ago, like based on like a food frequency questionnaire, that it doesn't really reflect what is actually kind of causing specific things. And I think from when we're looking at anything that it requires like consumption of something, whether it's a drink or a supplement or something like that, it's really hard to, or you have to be very critical to when you're evaluating nutrition research, because people can just jump into like, it's because of research that is, or the way that people interpret research, that there's so much stuff out there.
Yeah.
And how, because people just choose to, like, I was like telling somebody, I think it was like a comment or something on TikTok. Guys, it's like, you know, your people will always find the studies that will actually support their bias. Like that's just their
Absolutely.
reality. Like they're always going to find, like, if somebody says like alkaline diets are healthy and they're superior than anything else, you're going to find a study that is going to show something, is going to show something positive about alkaline diets, and you're going to take that to heart and say, look, here's the study that kind of shows that. And nobody really takes the time to kind of dissect it down, to really dive deeper into understanding what does that research really says, what are some of the limitations, what are some of the weaknesses, like all these different areas. And sometimes there's even a lot of red tape, I feel like, in the research world, you know. And again, we'll leave that conversation for a separate day, but then, you know, use as we evaluate and interpret some of this data, we have to really do so from a critical standpoint, instead of just like taking things at face value and saying like, hey, this is showing that there's no difference, so I'm going to take this and say I'm going to start drinking 2 beers a day.
Yeah.
Because it may
Yeah.
not be smart.
Well, because Alan talked about that. He said, you know, the best part of this is the tagline. I feel like for most people, media can get a hold of that. You know, we talked about what a good dietitian and nutrition coach was a couple episodes ago. It's exactly being able to do this, being able to dive into, see the limitations, and help the person apply the knowledge. Because you're right, Andres, we could probably find a bunch of things out there that say the alkaline diet is beneficial, and those people who have that bias are going to say, well, it's the number one. But again, we have to make sure that you navigate these types of critical things with experts like ourselves.
Agree.
Facts.
Cool. So don't go out there and just start drinking beers every day just because this research study says.
And if you do, wear a mask.
You do wear a mask.
Yeah, wear
And
your
send us a
freaking
Zoom
mask.
invite.
Yeah, wear your damn mask.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here today. And if you're listening to this or watching this on YouTube, make sure that you either, if it's YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button or hit the subscribe button. Even if you're just listening to this in our podcast, whether it's on Spotify, Apple, or Apple Podcasts or anything like that, or all those kinds of like platforms. So make sure you let us know if you enjoyed it. And of course, if you have any comments, any questions, feel free to reach out to us individually, and all our information is down in the show notes. Once again, thank you guys so much for listening, for coming back every single week, and we'll see you guys next. Take care.